All right, so our warm-up. Ready? Okay, so for the warm-up, you had, well, first of all, what we're doing today. Yesterday we stretched and shrunk, but basically just with like x squared or absolute value. Today we're going to go through with all the functions, stretching and shrinking them, and we're also going to do other things on top of that. So it's kind of bringing it all together. This is the last lesson before the review, and then the test is on Tuesday. So this is like bringing it all together in one piece, okay? So let's start with this. We needed to graph this parent function for the cubic family. What does that look like in an equation? It's x to the third, yeah. And we know that that starts at 0, 0, goes to 1, 1, 2, 8. Backwards, it goes down to -1, -1, and down to -2, -8. So this is our parent function, right?
Yeah.
Right? And then it says, what were the 5 key points? So what points did we identify here? -2, -8, -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, 1, and 2, 8. Okay, so those are some key points that we can use. And we're going to do an analysis of what happens when we go to 3x to the third, right? So 3x to the third has a factor, right? Right here, what is its factor?
30.
3, right? So everything is going to get stretched by 3 because it's not a fraction. So we should expect a stretch.
Is it just the y?
Just the y, very good. So in starting at 0, 0, instead of going over 1 up 1, I go over 1 up 3. Instead of back 1, down 1, I go back 1, down 3. And that's all I can fit on this graph.
Wait.
Time out, what? What's up?
From the one dot you got in the negative, the third.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get that one?
Well, I usually go over 1, down 1.
Yeah.
So I multiplied the down movement by 3 as well. All right, so it says what happened to the 3 key points? 3 because there's only 3 that left, right? I should have said 3 of the key points. But anyway, so basically it's asking about these 3, right? These 3 key points, what did they become? So instead of -1, -1, we had -1, -3. Instead of 0, 0, we had, well, 0, 0. Instead of 1, 1, we had 1, 3. So what would we expect 2, 8 to become?
224.
Exactly. 2, 24. Okay, so what's our takeaway here? And you kind of spoiled it already. What did you say?
What part?
You said we're doing what?
Stretching?
Right, but you said we're only,
Y?
yeah, we're only multiplying the y values. That's why I'm saying multiply the up and down movement. What is up and down? Up and down is y, right? So really the math we're doing when we do that is we multiply the y values by the factor.
Is it always going to be the one? Like, is it ever going to?
Are we ever going to multiply the x?
Yeah.
Nope. We're only multiplying the y. So we're stretched. That's why it stretches this way. That's why it shrinks this way. Because we're just affecting the y with these things, right? All right.
Why is 24?
Why 24? Because we had 2, 8 times 3. 8 times 3 is 24.
But why doesn't the 2 change?
Because we only multiply the y. We don't multiply the x. Good questions. Okay. So what we're going to do now, before we get into some crazy ones, some crazy functions. All right, so before we get into that, we're going to practice our over and up patterns for all of our parent functions, right? We're going to make sure we are locked in on these because we're going to start going a little wild with these functions and we want to know our patterns well. So this right here, these 4 boxes, like take really good notes right now. because this kind of sums up 4 lessons, right? So if you can have these 4 boxes in front of you while you're doing your homework, while you're doing the review next week, and it's going to be really helpful. So make sure you take good notes here. Yeah, what's up?
On the test, are we only going to be going over these 4 functions?
Yes, and possibly linear, but you know how to use linear, so you'll be fine with that.
Oh,
Straight line.
Just a straight line. Okay, so start with the parent. What is the parent that we see?
Quadratic.
It's quadratic, right? And yeah, some nice points here, 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 and here, right? So when we talk about our pattern, well, where do we start?
0, 0.
We always start at 0, 0. And then what's our first movement to get to our next point?
Up 1, over 1.
Yep. Over 1, up 1. And then we go back to 0, 0, and we do another movement. What's our next movement?
Over 2, up 4.
Over 2, up 4. Now, a lot of students make that mistake where they go over 1, up 1, over 2, up 4, and they just keep going. You have to go back to the starting point every time, okay? All right, and then what do we do?
Over 3, up 9.
Yeah, we could go over 3, up 9. We wouldn't have room on this graph, but hey, let's write it. And then what?
Finito.
Well, that would only give me points here.
The negative.
Go backwards, right? Repeat backwards. All right, so that's your quadratic. Make sense? On to the next one.
Quadratic.
Not quite. This one is called the square root. Okay? And this one has a nice little point here, a nice little point here, a nice little point here, a nice little point here. So where do we start? At 0, 0 again. And then where do we go first? Over 1, up 1 again.
Don't we go over 1, up 1 every single?
We'll find out, I guess. And then,
Over 4, up 2.
exactly, over 4, up 2.
Is that like always like, is that parent like function, is that always like that? Like,
Yeah.
always the spirit is over 4, up 2, and over 3, up 9.
Yeah, unless you're stretching it or moving it or, yeah, but like the parent is always this. Yep. Like if I stretched it, it would stretch the movement.
Oh,
But it starts at over 4, up 2.
okay.
Yep. Or that point would, I should say. And then over 9, up 3. Okay. That's that one, right? All right, let's roll down to this one. All right, so this is what? I heard it already? Cubic. And you'll notice each one of these has the equation for the parent function as well right there, right? And wait, where are we going to start this time?
0, 0.
Oh, it's 0, 0 again. Okay. Okay, but this time we're going to go from 0, 0, and we're going to go
Over 1, up 1.
over 1, up 1 again. Okay. And then we're going to go
Over 2, up 8.
over 2, up 8. Okay, so this one we can't just repeat backwards though, right? Because it's different on the other side. What would we do next? Well, if you reverse it, that would be kind of telling me to do a parabola. We would go what?
Down.
Back 1, down 1, right? So I guess it depends on what you meant by reverse it, but I like to be specific here. And then we would go back 2, down 8. Okay? All right. One, yep. And then we have one more after that. How do you know? I didn't even scroll over there yet. All right, ready? Okay, so then we have our favorite. Actually, I have no idea what your favorite. What is your favorite? What is it? Quadratic, absolute value?
It's the easiest one.
Who else? What else? Who else is a favorite?
Probably quadratic is like the easiest.
Okay, quadratic. It's curious. I do think this one's pretty easy. You'll see when you get the movements, right? Okay, so you could keep doing that all day, right? Okay, so this time we're going to start where? Okay, so what did we learn here? They all start at 0, 0, right? But in this one, we're going to go over 1 up 1. So, okay, what do we know then? Yeah, so like, if you're not sure where to start, you don't even know which function you have, at least you should know, no matter what, you start at 0, 0, and you go over 1 up 1, right? It's a good place to start. And then this one goes over 2, up 2, over 3, up 3, and so on. And then repeat backwards. Okay, so we're good on our parent functions. We know all the patterns. We're ready to go, right? Okay, because it's going to get a little crazy here. All right, so on the back. So before we do this, let's talk about the steps that I really recommend you taking. Okay, and it says steps for graphing, but this is what I want you to do. Put /writing, because they're kind of the same exact steps every time, whether you're writing a function from a graph or you're graphing a function that's written for you already. It's the same process, and I'll show you that process, okay? So the first thing you need to do is what we've been practicing, which is list your transformations. Just list them out. Right? Is it reflecting? Is it flipping? Is it stretching? Is it going left? Is it going up? Is it going down? Right? List them out. Okay? Once you have your list, right, then you need to find your, guys, new starting point. Because you need to know where to begin if it's not at 0, 0. Okay, so how would you do that? Well, which of our transformations tell us a different starting point? We have reflections, we have stretches, and we have translations. Which of them move our starting point? Translations, right? Up, down, left, right. So you're looking for your up, your down, your left, or your right. Right? That's going to tell you whether your starting point changed. Okay? All right, so that's covered. But now, that's only our translations. We also need to consider your flips, which would be any negatives that we find in there, right? And your stretches.
Up again. That's pretty much.
I did up again. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, so our stretches would be our factor that's out front, right? Okay, so we've listed our transformations, we found our new starting point, we know if we're flipping, we know if we're stretching. We're ready to graph, and we graph using key points. Pattern, I should say, using our key points pattern. Or, if we're writing the function, we write our function by looking at the key points, right? So you kind of do this a little in reverse if you're writing. These are definitely your steps for graphing, but it's all the same. It's just in a different order. Okay, so let's look at an example. Anybody still writing?
No, I'm done. Let's go. Leave them behind. Leave them behind.
Never leave a man or woman behind.
Never leave a living thing behind.
That's good. That's good. Okay, so let's look at this first example. Now, we've been practicing doing this for a week or two now, right? This breaking down, this dissecting, okay? All right, so here we go. If I'm starting to dissect this, I'm looking for what's different. First of all, there's kind of a step A above the steps, which is you got to know what parent function you're dealing with. What parent function am I dealing with here? It's quadratic. And I like to just write it above my function. Why do I do that? Well, now I can see what's been added. What's in our function that wasn't in the parent function? And there's a lot, right? I go left to right. What's the first thing I notice? Yeah, there's a negative. What's the next thing I notice? That, right? I mean, I know that you're already trying to think about what it does, but I'm just looking for what's there right now. So what's the next thing I see? This right there. And then the other thing I see is this right here, right? So then I count them. How many things did I circle, highlight, whatever I did, right? 4. So that means I got 4 things that are going to happen here, and I number 1 to 4. And that way I'm not going to miss any of them, all right? So that negative does what? It makes it flip down. So this is going to flip down. I got a 1/2. It's going to shrink it, right? It's not going to stretch it because it's not a number greater than 1. So I shrink by 1/2. I got a -2 on the inside, right 2, yep. And then I got a +6 at the very end, up 6. So you see how now we know everything that this thing is going to do? Step 1 is complete, right? All right, now our next step was to find our starting point. Which of these change our starting point? Up 6 and right 2. So this this is a starting point, right? This changes our starting point. Okay, so let's use that to get started here. So right 2, up 6 is my new starting point. Now I'm ready to get started, okay? Our next step was we got to consider, are we flipping or stretching? Are any of those, or shrinking? Are any of those things happening?
Yes.
Yep, we're flipping down and we're shrinking by 1/2, okay? So normally I would go over 1, up 1. But this one's going to go down. And is it going to go down 1?
1/2.
It's going to go down 1 times 1/2, which is 1/2, which is about this. And that point might be a little confusing, but the next one will be nice and clean. Because I go over 2 down 4 usually, so I'm going to go over 2 down 4 times 1/2, which is 2.
Are you not flipping upside down? Or?
I am. Look. This was
Okay.
that was from the parent function. I was just showing. And then I do the same thing backwards. Over 2 down 2. And I got 5 points, so that's good enough. And there's my parabola. Question?
How did you know it was over 2 down 2?
Because normally I go over 2 and then my movement is 4, right? But I have a 1/2. What's 4 times 1/2? 2. So the movement becomes 2 instead of 4. Okay? And if I wanted to go down 9 for the next one, it would become 4.5. Because that's 1/2 of 9. Okay? All right. So I'm going to give you time to work on this one on your own. That was an example of graphing. We got to get through an example of writing as well. So skip down to, let's do this middle one. Let's do this middle one. Okay. So again, our step A before our steps is we got to kind of know what parent function we're dealing with. What parent function is this? It's a square root function, right? So f of x equals the square root of x as our parent. This is going to be something that's similar, right? So that gives us a nice starting point. Okay, so now for this one, we need to kind of find our transformations where we see them. So we're still going to list them, but it's not going to be like going left to right in the graph. We kind of have to list them by looking at the graph. But I'm still going to start doing that. All right, so first thing I always look for is, did the starting point change? Yeah, so it's not 0, 0, it's over down here. So where did it move? If somebody moved this. It went left 3 and down 4. That's 2 movements that we just found. Left 3 and down 4. The next thing I try to find is, well, did it flip at all? Yeah. Normally it goes like this, and now it's going like this, so it flipped. Over the x-axis, it flipped down. And then the last thing I try to find is if it's stretched. Now, this is the hardest thing for students. What I want you to do when you're trying to find your stretch is go along the graph until you see the next good point. So I'm going, oh, here's another good point. And then you look at it and you say to yourself, normally this thing goes over 1, down 1 over 1. It went over 1 down 3. So what did they multiply the 1 by? 3, right? So that gives you your factor. So factor of 3. Okay, now we gotta write this function. Okay, so f of x equals. All right, first thing we always write in a function is a negative if it flipped down. Did it flip down? Yes. So I'm going to put a negative. Next thing we always write is the factor if there's a factor. Is there a factor? Yes, 3. This is a square root that I'm going to open up. If I go left or right, I need to do stuff on the inside. It went left 3. So I write plus 3. So x plus 3. And then it also went down 4. That's always the last thing we do is up or down. And it's going down 4, so I'm going to write minus 4. And look at this crazy function that y'all just wrote based on that graph. Like, if I told you 2 weeks ago you'd be able to write that function from a graph, you'd be like, what? I don't think so, right? But look at all the stuff we learned. It's pretty cool, right? Knowledge is power. You've learned a lot, and now you can do some pretty complicated stuff, okay? All right, so this is what I want you to do with the rest of your time. I want you to work on graphing this other one and writing these other 2, okay? And I'll come and help around and help as needed. And if we have time, we have about 7 minutes. So if we have time, I'll pop onto the board and do them as well. Okay? What's up?
Do we have homework?
Yes, we have homework. So when you're finished and you're accurate, you can get the homework. All right. All right, real quick, I just want to show you on this one how to find the stretch, because it seems to be a point of confusion. Okay, so just talking stretch right now. Ready? Normally, or shrink, I should say. Normally, something goes over 1, up 1, right? Did it go up less than that or more than that?
Way more.
Our thing went to here. Is that going up less or more? Less. Yeah, so I know it's going to be a shrink. They're harder to find. So what I do, listen up, please. Girls. So what I do is I wait, I look for a good point. No. Okay, here's a good point. It went over 3, up 3. Well, usually when we go over 3 in a parabola, we go up what? 9. This went up 3. So 9 got multiplied by something and it became 3. What must that something be? 1/3. 1/3, right? So that's how you find your shrinks. So probably the hardest part of it. All right, here comes your homework.